I want to show you one of my favorite clips from Kyle Kulinski that he made 5 years ago. This is about the time that I started to watch him. And unfortunately, because I watched him so much, my commentary comes across a lot like his. I'm still trying to find my own lane, but I give a lot of credit to Kyle for the inspiration towards the creation of this channel. And it's videos like this that I'm about to show you that really reflect great commentary on modern political dialogue. I'm showing you this old clip because it's, in my view, more relevant today than it was back when Kyle Kulinski made the video, especially considering the massive shift to the right that conservatives have made recently. Take a look at the video and then we'll talk about it.
I'm going to absolutely blow your mind with this one. This blew my mind when I was researching earlier. Wendell Willkie is a conservative Republican who ran against FDR in the 1940 election. Listen to what he has to say about the issues, and you'll see just how much the spectrum in America has shifted to the right.
Because I am a businessman, of which incidentally I am very proud and was formerly connected with a large company, the doctrinaires of the opposition have attempted to picture me as an opponent of liberalism. But I was a liberal before many of those men heard the word, and I fought for the reforms of the elder La Follette and Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson before another Roosevelt adopted and distorted the word liberal. I believe that the forces of free enterprise must be regulated. I'm opposed to business monopolies. I believe in the right of collective bargaining by labor without any interference and full protection of that obvious right. I believe in minimum standards for wages and maximum standards for hours, and I believe that such standards should constantly improve. I'm in favor of the regulation of interstate utilities, of banking, of the security markets. I believe in federal pensions, in adequate old age benefits, and in unemployment allowances.
That dude is too liberal for today's Democratic Party. Never mind today's Republican Party. He'd be kicked out and he'd be the laughingstock of the debate. He would get nonstop boos if he was at any of these debates. Boo, boo, collective bargaining, boo. You want to regulate free markets, boo.
That dude actually made me question the whole philosophy of modern conservatism. That video is really good. Kyle Kulinski, I give him a huge amount of credit for digging that video up. But that video is even more relevant today than it was 5 years ago. And it's hilarious seeing Kyle 5 years younger. He looks totally different. And doing that weird boo thing. He doesn't do that anymore. But again, that dude actually made me question the entire philosophy of modern conservatism. You see, conservatism is this idea that we should conserve the status quo. Modern conservatives frame the status quo as it was 100 years ago, minus some obvious racist and sexist policies passed in the 1960s, and maybe sometimes not so much. Guys, this was the right-winger of the early 20th century that you just watched. Those were the right-wing values at the time. So think to yourself for a moment, what values are modern conservatives conserving today? I mean, if you look at it from the technical standpoint, conservatives are not really conservatives because virtually no American likes the system that we have right now. Either they want to revert it back to where it was, make America great again. That's not really a conservative ideal from a definition standpoint of conservatism. That's not really conservatism. You're trying to revert back to the status quo as it was back then. And then you have progressivism, which is progressing in the future. And so the conservatives today are not conservatives. There's no conservatives out there that actually want to preserve. And if there are conservatives, if you're a conservative and you actually want to preserve the status quo as it is today, then you're stupid. No one agrees with you. Like, no one agrees with you. But anyways, that's beside the point. So that really begs the question, conservatives today, the conservatives, I put quotes around that to mean like the label that conservatives use, typically the conservatives use. So they want to revert back to what it was. They want to make America great again. But what are they reverting to? That right-winger from the early 20th century literally talked about how old his values were at the time that he made that video. And that he dated it all the way back to Theodore Roosevelt in 1901. So this really begs the question. When conservatives argue that they're trying to conserve their capitalist agenda, when was that the status quo? When did the status quo reflect the values of modern conservatives today? I have the answer. Never. There's never been a status quo where people are like, yeah, you know, capitalism, no regulations. Sounds good. Like that's maybe 1774 and 1776, you know, like that, maybe. But even then, it's like, it wasn't looked at from a good perspective. People wanted some sort of established government. They wanted to be taxed so that they can have better programs. People were starving to death. Like, they wanted to establish basic food. They wanted food. They wanted to make farming easier. Like, there's so many things. And that wasn't until FDR when all these things were, all these problems were resolved by increasing the effective tax rate of the rich. But the thing is, that sort of philosophy that you saw from the video, from Kyle Kulinski's video, that was the right-wing philosophy at the time, and it dated back to Theodore Roosevelt, back to 1901. So that was 1901 all the way through the 1940s. That was the right-winger. So whenever someone comes up to you and says, hey, I'm a conservative, I just want to go back to the way it was, you have to ask, when was it the way it was? Because if it was like the 1950s and 1960s or whatever, you know, 1970s, 1980s, you can just say, oh, you mean the time that was the golden age of the US when we had an effective tax rate of 93% at one point? Oh, no, 1920s, I meant the 1910s. And then you say, oh, you mean the time when you had right-wingers who would talk about regulations on capitalism and a living wage. No, like 50 years before that. Like, eventually you're going to run into, the thing I want to conserve really is the barbarians. That, yeah. I like that one. The very thought that capitalism should go unregulated is not a value in our modern markets today. And it never was a value in any market in American history for over 100 years now. Actually, 120 years now. Conservatives need to wake up and realize that they reflect the values of corporatism. Unregulated capitalism leads to corporatism because of the bull that they watch on TV and the politicians that they elect. Of course, that's pie in the sky. Like, conservatives really need to reflect on their philosophy and where are they going? What do you mean by make America great again? When we had a free market, we didn't. That's never been an ideal that people have ever said, yeah, free markets, right? That's actually a modern thing. Modern conservatives want to do that. But what they are, they're progressives from a philosophical standpoint towards regression. So regressives, but towards like barbaric ideals. Not a good idea. When you put it that way, you're like, that kind of sounds a little bad.